Hi, and welcome to Synchronicity. We are here with Dr. Stan Tatkin. We're here to talk about his latest book, In Each Other's Care, a guide to the most common relationship conflicts and how to work through them. Dr. Stan Tatkin is the creator of PACT, a psychobiological approach to couples therapy. His work has personally helped me so much in my life and my relationships. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Tatkin.
It's good to see you, Marie. It's been a long time.
It has. Why did you write the book In Each Other's Care?
Well, this is a different book than the other ones I've written. And this was written during the pandemic when, people were freaked out and everybody was at home quarantining. And I switched from seeing people in my clinic to seeing people online. And I have always been focused on social justice theory within the couple system. And so that became a bigger deal during the pandemic, for me at least. And so I decided to write this book and break it down by complaints that I see in my clinic, which was fun to do. So broke it down by complaints. But the two main messages of the book are as follows. Two things that I think that will destroy any union, any alliance between two people in a free society. And that is a lack of structure, a lack of organization, that partners must co-create the structure of their relationship from scratch. They must co-create a culture that is uniquely their own, and they also must create, by agreement and permission to enforce, rules of engagement, which we call principles of governance, how we're going to protect each other from each other. So other unions among free people get each other on board, whether it's a band or a dance troupe, or if it's going to be the military, or it's a business, based on shared ideas, shared mission, shared purpose, shared vision. Only couples don't do that. And that turns out to be a big, big problem. It's highly predictive in terms of not just longevity, but also happiness. And the second thing that will tank any union over time is the manner in which, let's say we're a couple, you and I, the manner in which you and I will interact when one or both of us is under stress. That's the other thing that will crash and burn, because we're animals, because we tend to have a very strong survival instinct, and that survival instinct is not terribly discriminate. So the way we look at each other, the way we talk to each other, the tone we use, after a while begins to feel threatening based on memory, based on what we've seen, experienced before. And because couples tend to operate like family, even though they're not, the attachment relationship, the primary attachment relationship in adulthood tends to have a memory that runs very, very long. And so it's very easy for us to get threatened by our behavior, right? And if it's not repaired, then it goes into threat memory, which accrues. So those are the two biggies. And so I'm repeating basically the messages in the book through each complaint, which is something I've not done before.
Awesome. Thank you. So it sounds like what you're saying is that when we're in that pair bond, that romantic pair bond, and we're really in it, it brings up all of the childhood stuff, all of the ways we had to prove ourselves and survive to get by in that culture.
Right.
We're responding in the moment based on emotions from when we were 6.
It's sometimes we're memory animals. And so almost everything we do is by memory. It's one of the ways we conserve energy is by making everything new old and to make anything complicated simple or easy so that we don't have to expend the same energy again and again. So that means we automate everything. We relegate things to something called procedural memory, where we are basically operating by pattern recognition and not really using critical thinking much of the time. So that also goes to relationships. You and I begin to automate each other and think we know each other. We think we're family, which we're not. We begin to take shortcuts, which we probably shouldn't, but everyone does. And we take liberties. Love relationships tend to have different expectations and a different set of entitlements than any other relationship, right? So it makes it more difficult. And yes, you and I will project on each other because it's a projective dyadic situation, and where we're going to remind each other of everyone in our lives that made us feel great and made us feel terrible.
Thank you, Stan. There's a page in your book, I'll just read it. In the world of secure functioning relationships where shared power, authority, fairness, justice, and sensitivity are central to peace and harmony, such things as intention, motivation, emotional challenges, and past history don't count. The only thing that really counts is doing or not doing the right thing for a two-person system.
Correct. Yeah.
So can you say more about what you meant in that section?
Well, when we think of a union and it has a shared purpose, let's say that we are a survival team, you and I, and it could be argued that that's true. We interdepend on each other for health, like lowering interpersonal stress is health, right? Making the relationship as easy as possible is health, right? Being safe and secure also leads to good health as well and survival. So we guarantee each other's safety and security at all times. That's a principle based on a purpose that we decide we're going to do. So my saying that I'm trying, or I will try to ensure your safety and security isn't sufficient when we're talking about a purpose-centered principle, which must be done regardless of how I feel. Otherwise, we're back to what everyone does. I'll do it if I feel like it. If I don't feel like it, I won't. So, phrases like I'm trying, or I'm working on it, or I want to do this right thing by you, don't really mean anything to you. They don't really have any currency, right? You can't take a picture of trying or working on it or wanting anything. You only care whether I do or don't do what we decided was the right thing, was the best thing to do. Our decision, not mine, not yours, ours. And so we expect each other to honor these agreements and to stick to these purpose-centered principles, because to not do that would put us in peril, right? It would make you not trust me, which destroys the whole purpose, because we're doing this because we want to absolutely, unequivocally trust each other, feel safe and secure, so we can do business, so we can create, so we can do a lot of things that we wouldn't be able to do if we started to not trust each other, right? So that's why I'm saying in this world, really no excuses. There's only two people holding up this alliance. Therefore, we both have to do what we say we're going to do, or we will both suffer.
So you mentioned the idea of interdependence, and there is such a fear right now in our society of codependence. That's so codependent that you want me to text you or give me a phone call before bed. I'm not going to do that. That's codependent to rely on each other, which to me, that's not codependent. So can you tell us the difference between interdependence and codependence and why we want to be interdependent?
Well, first things first. The problem with our need as human beings to categorize everything, like everything else, it's a feature and a bug. The feature is we need to categorize things in order to organize our experience, right? And so in science, we classify, categorize to understand that which we are looking at or studying. The same thing in medicine, the same thing in psychiatry, the same thing in psychology. We come up with categories, for better or worse, to understand why somebody is suffering, what we can do about it, right? How can we treat that? When it becomes popularized, people use these terms as a cudgel to hit each other over the head and to otherize each other or themselves, right? And that's not the intention of, well, let's go back to the word codependency. It was actually coined when I was still working as a therapist during the time of the co-alcoholic. This was an AA term, co-alcoholic, alcoholic. The co-alcoholic would be the enabler, the person who is looking to the partner like the partner looks to the alcohol, a one direction only relationship, right? One direction only. And that morphed into codependency with John Bradshaw and Beatty and all sorts of other people during that time. Codependency, co-alcoholic, was the person who was enabling the alcoholic. So codependency then became someone who is needy and somebody who will do anything to keep the relationship, even though it's only in one direction and it's unfair and unjust. Then it morphed into worse things, pejorative things, things that really sound terrible and pathologizing of what codependency is. I won't get into some of those terms, but okay, so it's a little bit aggravating because dependency has gotten a bad name. Yet our species, by nature, the human primate, is a dependency animal. We're pack animals. We group in herds. And so we are, by definition, we're not hyenas, we're not lone wolves. We do depend on each other. Dependency is something we obviously know about when we are very young, infants, and when we become very old, right? Even though we don't like it. Interdependency is a whole different idea that is really two independent, autonomous adults operating when unionizing based on terms and conditions, deal or no deal. You and I get together, not hopefully based on just love, because love isn't enough. That gets us in the door. It doesn't sustain relationship. We have to organize according to what's in it for us. What's in it for me? Why should we be doing this? Why are we a couple? Why do we even exist? What's the point of us, right? If that's not defined, then we could become codependent, or one of us could be putting more into the pot than the other in hopes that the other will come around. That is not a fair and equal system, right? Interdependence means you and I have the same things to gain and the same things to lose. We're equal shareholders. Our fates are tied. Therefore, we're two generals. We're two executives, or two bosses, two leaders. We're at the top of the food chain. We are accountable to each other and everyone else to us, right? So that means that codependency can't exist, right? It's counter interdependent. It's counter secure functioning. You've got to do this. I've got to do this. We both agreed, so you're going to do it, right? We have the equal power to enforce. We have equal leverage. That's not independence, because we're working together like a team, any more than a team. The members are independent. They can only be independent so far as they're team players, right? So that's what the term means as I'm defining it.
Thank you, Stan. So it sounds like in the way that I've been observing codependency, the word codependency used, it's kind of well, that feels uncomfortable to me, so I'm going to label it codependent.
Yeah. Or you're doing something I don't like and it's foreign to me, or it's something I don't think I should do. And let's see if I can come up with a word for that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Stan. So you're covering in your book, In Each Other's Care, the problem with being human, reducing threat, which I think we've talked a fair bit about, reducing that threat and immediately soothing each other, and both parties taking responsibility for our own emotions and the other person's emotions. Because I think in a lot of this self-help world, and I see your face, did I get something wrong there?
Well, no. I wanted to clarify one thing, because let's imagine for a moment, because I think picturing the idea of a two-person psychological system makes it easier. So a two-person psychological system, or three or four, depends if you're polyamory, then more. But let's just keep it right now to the dyadic system, which could be any gender, any sex, any culture, it doesn't matter, right? Fairness and justice is the same no matter where you are. It's a subjective sense of fairness and justice, right? So if we have a shared purpose and a shared vision, let's say you and I are professional ice skaters, right? And we're competing in the Olympics, and we're different people, autonomous people, but we have a shared interest, a shared purpose in skating together to be the very best team we can be, right? And we have a vision to make it to the I was going to say Academy Awards, wrong image, make it to the Olympics, right? We're going to have to work together with our differences as two autonomous individuals to make sure we work as a team to win. That means we have to know each other really well. We have to know each other's bodies. We have to deal with each other's abilities and maybe weaknesses, right? And compensate for them, because we both want the same thing. We work together, right? This is not a solo sport. That is more the idea of what I'm talking about in terms of secure functioning. Or if you were doing a potato sack race, you both want to win. You don't want to look ridiculous with all the other couples that are doing it. You want to get to the end, but yeah, you know what? You cannot work together. You pull against each other. One person tries to go faster than the other and you both fall, and you just can't get it going, right? It's a practice, but it's also an idea that I have to consider you at the same time I'm considering myself, or we will fall. We won't move. We won't do anything. We'll pull against each other. There's nothing magical about this. This is a practical, tactical reality of teamwork. So put away the idea of codependency, dependency, any of that. This is teamwork to achieve a common shared goal, set of goals, a shared purpose, and where we want to go, right? There's a problem if you and I are pointing in two different directions. If you are wanting polyamory and I'm wanting monogamy, neither of us are wrong, but will we work as a team? Probably not. If you have to live in the country and I have to live in the city. I hate the country, you hate the city, right? Nothing wrong with that, but can we live together? How's that going to work, right? It's going to be a problem. So obviously, teams depend on having a shared idea of itself and where it's going and why it's doing this, and that everyone gets served, right? Otherwise, what's the point? That's secure functioning, and that's what I'm trying to get across. Two autonomous people that have to work together, or they will be misinterpreted as unfriendly, a threat to the other person, and then they will fight. That's the human condition, no matter where you are in the world. Right? So that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that brought up, I love the analogy of the sack race and the figure skating. And coming back to that personal will aspect where we have to do what's right for the partnership and for the team. And yet we are only able to do what's within our control, right? So if we have a partner who maybe they say, yeah, I'm on board with this secure functioning idea, but in practice, we're putting in consistent secure functioning effort and it just doesn't seem to be working. Maybe our perception is that other person isn't leaning into the teamwork as much as we would like them to do. At what point do we, where do we try harder and where do we say, give it up?
Well, there are several things here to unpack. One is we have to consider the attachment system, which is a biological mandate that basically leads to, much of the time, saying, I can't quit you. We confuse the biology of attachment for love. We often confuse attachment defenses, insecure attachment, when we defend against what we are most afraid of, either engulfment or abandonment. That behavior is felt as threatening to the other person, right? I'm protecting myself from something I fear, but it looks unfriendly to you. So there's that. That makes these relationships very complicated. But also, if I can't, once I'm attached to you, and that's nature's glue, right? Gets us to stick together and gets us to unionize, right? For lots of reasons. If I am really glued to you and feel that I can't quit you, then there becomes a problem, because I'm no longer thinking in terms of principles. I'm no longer thinking in terms of shared purpose. I'm only afraid of losing you. And therefore, that's the end game for me, is not to lose you. At that point, that is when I do not stand up for secure functioning principles and I lose. This is where I would end up being unhappy, because I can't throw down and say, hey, this is unfair. We made agreements, you keep breaking them, and I can't rely on you. That should be a fireable offense. You know, am I safe in the foxhole with you? You run every time I'm in trouble. You run every time I'm bleeding out. I don't think that's good, right? And so you're out until you can prove to me that you will abide by what we agree to, and that you are a good faith actor, right? So there's that, right? There's that problem. Then there is the issue of secure functioning is difficult to do. It's hard to do. Yet, if you think about it, it's the only way that any relationship can last over time and be happy. Any other way of approaching it becomes too unfair, too unjust, too insensitive, too much of the time, and accrues resentment and threat. So it's hard, but it's worth it if you want a long-term happy relationship. It takes a lot of doing things that is the right thing to do, says the two of us, even though it will be the hardest thing to do in the moment. That's growing up. That's character. That's being principle-based, right? And purpose-based, not feeling-based, right? If people are adjudicating or legislating or litigating according to emotion, that's why they're not going to make it. It has to be a greater purpose. We have to be working for something higher than our animal instincts or primitive instincts, which are not great, not very lovely. We have, I tell this to people that those of us that study the human condition and the human primate as a species knows that we are and always have been by nature aggressive, warlike, opportunistic, moody, fickle, easily influenced by groups, and xenophobic. We otherize, we tend to be racists, to use that word. We otherize. Anybody who is too different from us becomes an other. And we do that with our partners. We do that with our kids. We do that with our neighbors. This is part of our species. And the only thing that prevents us from doing terrible things are principles, laws, governance, right? Rules, socialization, civilization. And in the love arena, we don't think about these things, right? You and I don't plan for our devils. Well, you'd never do that. You're too sweet. I would never do that. Come on. I'm a nice guy, and I love you. I would never do that to someone I love. Well, what about when I hate you? What about when I'm really mad at you? What about if I'm under so much stress, all I can think about is my interests, never yours? So, we have to kind of wake up to our nature and understand that to not self-organize together and to prevent each other from doing whatever we want is rational and sane, right? It protects us, it protects feelings, and it allows good feelings to emerge and stay there, right? It allows for earned love, not the kind that we just wait for to pass over us, right? It's earned every day.
Thanks, Dan. Wow, that brought up so much emotion for me and so many images. I was kind of picturing these videos of when people have put a camera on their cat because there's been like
Yes.
a cat up to no good, and your kitty's like so sweet when they're at home, and then you see what they're doing at night, and they're that animalistic hunter predator cat that you would never expect. And I really appreciate what you said. And I imagine that a lot of people watching this and listening are going to think, no, that doesn't apply to me. I'm a good person. I don't have that dark side. But we're in so much denial a lot of the time of that human animal part of ourselves. Like, one of the biggest problems with racism these days and all of the isms is that nobody wants to admit that they have those thoughts or feelings. No one can talk about it. It's not safe to talk about it. And if we can't admit that the human brain is wired to exclude anyone who doesn't feel similar to us in that moment, it creates more of what we're ignoring and denying.
It's the hubris of our species, right? Just like I believe that my memory, my perception, my communication is always right, when none of it is true, right? We can prove that communication is extraordinarily faulty and error prone. We're mostly misunderstanding each other every day. Our memory is terrible. It always will be. Our recording of experience is terrible. It's based on a lot of different conditions, what we ate, how much we slept, how much noise and light there is in the atmosphere. All these things contribute to our recording of information. And yet we will argue to the death that I remember correctly. It was Tuesday, it wasn't Wednesday, right? And so, and that what I see, smell, hear, and taste is exactly the same that you do. So that's what I mean by selfish, self-centered. We never lived outside of our heads, and we never will. Therefore, you and I being two different people becomes a bug. We complain about it. We go to therapy over it. Oh, we're so different, and any therapist worth their salt is going to go, yeah, so of course, yes, you are different. Why is that special? You're supposed to be different people, and you're supposed to understand each other's differences and be able to work with each other based on a different person. You're the animal I picked. Therefore, it's unfair to you if I don't become an expert on this animal, which is you. I have to be able to know how to manage and handle you without ever using a stick or a whip, right? That is a career in learning the person I'm in the foxhole with, the person who may save my life at some point, the person I'm traveling through time with, the person I'm aging with, my confidant, my point person, right? So our attitudes about this really, I think, is the problem. We don't get it. We don't understand that we're stronger together than we are alone. We need other people. We've always unionized and allied with people who are very different than us. Thy enemy of my enemy is thy friend, right? Okay, what does it take for us to find where we're the same and where we agree? It's actually quite simple. You have to look to where you are the same and where you agree, and that's where you operate, and that's how you legislate. Where do we both want to feel safe and secure? Yeah, we do. How you want your safety and security, that can be arranged. Do we keep each other safe and secure even when we are frightened? Do we do that for the other person? Yes, we do, because we must, right? We're depending on each other for this. So it's a different way of looking at survival in life. And you can be sure people in Ukraine think of this, right? They know what's important, right? To preserve their relationships, to preserve each other's life. They know it's important. And so they do work together. They must work together, right? We don't think that. I think we think that we have the luxury to do things in a union that are good for us only. And it doesn't really matter if it's good for you, right? And that kind of behavior, that one person thinking, is going to ruin the relationship sooner or later. Plus, if I start to act like a one-person system, me, my, I, and you, that compels you to do the same thing. And now we're adversaries. So again, this is actually common sense. And people know this, but we're lazy and entitled, and we think we're family, and we don't think we should have to do it. I think you should.
Of course. Yeah.
I don't think I should. And by the way, the reason I'm unhappy is you. That's the other thing we do across the board. That's you. We externalize everything, as having, if we're not feeling well, feeling unhappy, it's happening from the outside. Sometimes we just blame ourselves, which is another mistake. So it is just human, and it's humorous, except when you're in it. But a lot of this is really about understanding how we all are, men, women, doesn't matter, how we all are, by studying your history, by looking at what's going on today, by just looking at what goes on with you. We get in the same kinds of trouble in relationships all the time. So this is about being smarter, planning, preparing, predicting, and working together as a team, as if your life depended on it, which I could argue that it does.
Thanks, Stan. There's a lot there, that survival, like in our society right now. I mean, I've kind of been thinking this for the last 20 plus years, as I've sort of slowly been watching our society disintegrate, where we're not taking enough action. As long as most of us have our distractions, most of us have our comforts, there's more and more injustice in our world. There's virtually no middle class anymore. But it's not we, the people, all of us together collectively, are not actually going to get together and organize or do much about it until it hits this critical mass where everybody's homeless, everybody's living in a war. And it almost seems like that seeking of comfort and the status quo that is part of our mammalian survival, right? Like we look for what's comfortable, and we're kind of like, okay, I'm going to stay here and conserve my energy. Mm-hmm. But what we really need to do as couples in relationships, and as teams at work, and as political parties that are different, we need to start coming together and working on what is mutually beneficial for everybody. Because this individualistic, well, I'm still okay because I make 6 figures, but my neighbor who only makes...
When you do, can I borrow some money?
Yeah, no, I don't. But yeah, that attitude of like, yeah, I still have my needs met, so I'm not so worried about those other people's needs. I mean, that's almost the same as that individualistic thing that happens in the relationship. Well, I'm going to do what's right for me, and you can sort it out. You're struggling, that's your problem, right? And the more that we do that, it damages our interpersonal romantic relationships. But it's also, I mean, we're at the point where we're in a climate disaster, we're in a housing crisis, the racial tension and the just political tension everywhere is just so heightened all the time, and the polarization is so strong, and yet everybody's struggling. but they're struggling with different things and they're not willing to work together. So I don't know, do you have any advice for like what we as individuals can do to make our world, not only our one-to-one relationships, but our world a little bit more of a mutuality-based planet?
Well, I think you said it correctly. We well, all living things are based on energy conservation. That's biology, right? We have to. If there wasn't that biological principle, we would burn out. We wouldn't be able to exist. We wouldn't be able to do much, right? So there are all these systems that are built in that make us focused in one area and not in another. Kind of lazy, avoidant, kicking the can down the road, focusing on what's right in front of us, all that stuff, right? So I don't know on the greater, because I the more I understand about us, the more I realize that this is a large system that I don't have a lot of control over, right? Larger systems begin to break down. But think of the United States as always, living a lie. The lie being all men are created equal. That's the biggest lie. And yet the idea was aspirational, and a lot of ideas of our union as Americans, up until recently, has been with a stronger shared purpose, right? A stronger shared purpose, a stronger shared mythology. Let's call it what it is. A shared mythology that everyone could believe in with a vision, right? And it unified us, right? It unified us, even though there were lies and there were people, the have-nots, the people who, weren't privileged, aren't privileged, and are, subjugated to the bottom barrel, right, and oppressed. So that has existed. But I think things didn't fragment, fall apart until we lost the shared mission, shared purpose, shared vision, and began to tribalize, because that's what will happen when there isn't a shared purpose and vision and a goal. And that's why many times politically, countries will go to war to unify the country and keep them from creating civil war. Right now, we have a unified enemy, so we're not fighting each other anymore. Right, we're Americans. 9/11, we're Americans, and then of course that was short-lived. So that very same thing happens in families and happens in partners. Right, you and I stop being a couple, we stop focusing on why we exist as a couple and the permanence of our relationship, based on not only being a sovereign union, a government of our own, right? That we're the leaders, we call the shots for ourselves and our family, and right. And then we have constantly goals that we're working towards, things we're building, creating, co-creating, problems we're solving together, rather than solving each other, which is war. If we don't have that, there's civil war. We start fighting each other, and we drift, or we just focus on the children. We're just parents now. We're no longer a couple, and then empty nesters. We find no reason to be together. It's the same problem. It's just here it's in a smaller system where it is actually manageable. But the same laziness, the same over-focus in one area, and we'll get to it another time, is also what gets us in our close relationships. We don't do something about something in a timely fashion. We don't fix things when they're broken. We don't repair injury when we've created an injury in our partner or our kids. We don't do a lot of things, and then we pay the price. Right? Because we're not looking downstream. We're not looking at what could possibly go wrong. What are the consequences of being inert, not doing anything, or doing the same thing over and over again that is leading to more threat memory and inflammation? Brilliant animals, human primates, and so stupid in so many ways. Me included, of course.
Yes, we all have to accept. Yeah.
So stupid, and it's so frustrating, because everything that's happening at the macro level happens in the micro level, happens at home, It's the same old, right? And now we're just seeing it, except there's more helplessness because this is a huge, system with a certain momentum at this moment that frightens all of us, right?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Stan. And I'm sure you can see sort of the emotion in my face for most of our discussion is that there's a lot of pain and sadness coming up for me, because I just feel like you said, we have so much potential as a species and so much brilliance and kindness and goodness, and yet we're also freaking idiots a lot of the time as a species, and especially collectively. I just really appreciate you being willing to hold this space and have this conversation, and I hope that everybody who's watching is kind of gaining some insight into how they can acknowledge that, it doesn't mean that we're bad or wrong. We don't have to be perfect, right? Because that's another thing, is that you mentioned, like, either we're blaming the other person or we're saying, oh, it's all my fault, I'm such a piece of crap, right?
Instead of looking at the problem, if you have a problem or we have a problem, you and I should work the problem always like a puzzle. We put it out as a third thing in 3D, and we work the problem in a collaborative, cooperative way. The alternative is we start working on each other. And as soon as that happens, it's game over for the time being. We're not getting out of that anytime soon. As soon as I work on you, you're compelled, absolutely compelled, to protect your interests and then to work on me. And now we're caught in a loop, right? So again, knowing these things about us as human beings, not pathologizing, because this is human nature, right? Taking responsibility for the bugs in relationship that are features elsewhere, and account for them and also plan for them so that we are able to rise above our primitive instincts, which are usually not pro relationship, they're mostly pro self, and start to put in guardrails and start to learn each other and know how to work with each other, which we would do if our lives depended on it. I want to remind people, we know how to do this. We know how to do this. We just don't want to do it. We don't think we should do it. And for those of us who've been doing it badly for a long time, we've built up so much a sense of unfairness. We want our justice, even though we're going to perpetrate injustice on the other person by doing so, right? So the beat goes on. It is the human condition, and we are annoying creatures. But to know that and accept that, and then to put things in place, that is sublime, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine that you and I could create anything we want just by imagining it first, which is, we're the only species that can do that. And we both want that. We both want that. That would be great. So we make a principle that's based on the purpose of obtaining that. Let's say we're you and I were smokers, and we decide we're not going to smoke anymore. So we're going to be free of smoking, and we decide we're going to do that. We place the bar high. We now give each other permission to enforce, and we hold each other to it. It's going to be a lot easier for us to do it together than doing it alone, right? But we're doing it with agreement, a prior agreement, and permission to enforce. That's powerful, right? And maybe that's a stupid example. There are other examples. I
don't know if it's a stupid example, because I've definitely seen people where there were two people who both had a drinking problem. Mm-hmm. One was the drinking problem caused a lot more problems. It's a little more extreme. So one person said, I need you to stop drinking completely, but I'm going to still drink.
Yeah.
And of course that doesn't work.
It's not good. It doesn't work really well for a lot of reasons, but we won't get into them.
Yeah.
It doesn't part. No, we have to both buy into what it is what it is we are wanting to improve our life. So here's an example, maybe a better one. My wife and I, and this isn't a big principle, this is basically a guardrail, but my wife and I agree that we can go to bed angry, but we have to at least touch toes. And we decided touching toes was the minimal, but the most important thing, because on a psychobiological level, touching toes is an unequivocal friendliness that suggests, even though I'm angry with you, we're okay. We're okay. And to signal to each other that we're okay is sufficient for us to get a good night's sleep, to not get sick by causing this existential crisis, attachment crisis, which we will experience. Will the relationship exist tomorrow, right? So we're taking that off the table because it's the best thing we could do. There's no upside to doing anything other than that. And we do it even if it's the last thing we want to do. It must be done. When you start to build in things like this that must be done because we decided that's the best thing we could do, that would be a good life, that's the safest thing to do because we never want that to happen, that's how you create an awesome life, right? Based on a purpose you both buy into, and then you give each other permission to enforce. You got to do it. You said you would do it now, right? And and the agreement is you're not going to fight back because you said, right? So it gets done. It gets done. And that is what builds and creates the things I think we all want in a love relationship. It's going to be pretty much the same. Most everyone agrees on the big ticket items if they actually allow themselves to go there. But we don't want to put that architecture together, right? We want to just make life easier. I've got work to do. I've got my career. I've got the kids. I don't have time for this. We'll talk about it later, right? And we just are flying a plane that's not fully built, and that's not safe. It's just not, right? And that's the message I'm trying to get across to people.
Thank you, Stan. I want to be mindful of your time. I know we've got to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but thank you for pointing out that really tangible example, because I know a lot of people have learned this: never go to bed angry, and that is actually not the greatest advice if it means you're going to stay up all night fighting and draining each other. So if you follow Stan on social media, you'll see some of his little clips and memes. And one piece of advice, I believe, is to limit arguments to 15 minutes. And
as a practice, you could set up a timer and let's see how good you do. I do this in my clinic. You got 10 minutes to wrap this up to where you both are okay. Otherwise, you better luck next time, right? Mm-hmm. It's a team sport. Yeah.
So rather than that idea of never go to bed angry, it sounds like a more effective agreement would be to never go to bed completely disconnected. Even if you're still angry, you're still reminding, hey, we'll sort this out. It will be okay.
Yeah, I hate you right now, but we're okay.
Yeah.
Both can exist, and both are healthful things to say. We exist. Also, that I hate your guts right now. That's fine. That's fine. But what you want to know, and what I need to know, is that we will exist tomorrow. This isn't an end of our lives together as a couple. That is unnecessary, unless you're going to do that, in which case do it, don't threaten it. But nobody benefits from an existential crisis that goes all the way back to infancy. If mommy dies, I die, which happens to all of us. Just don't play with that. We're good. I'll strangle you later, but we're good. Okay, that's all we need, really.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Stan. The name of the book is In Each Other's Care, A Guide to the Most Common Relationship Conflicts and How to Work Through Them. The book is full of all of the things, like writing do's and don'ts and how to read your partner, money, mess, all those things, dealing with other people.
Have children.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, Stan, is there anything else that you wanted to close with?
Well, if people can reach me, maybe that's not what you meant, but people can reach me by going to thepactinstitute.com. That's the PACT institute.com. If you're a clinician, you want to learn how to work with this polytheoretical approach called PACT, you can find trainings there. We do them throughout the year. If you are interested in couples workshops, my wife and I do them throughout the year. Virtually, but we also do couple retreats, and we'll be doing one. It's a luxury retreat in Portugal next year. So sign up for that. All right. And just take good care of each other.
Thank you so much for your time, Stan. It's been such a pleasure talking with you today.
It's good to see you again.
I'll do a little end thing after, but yeah, thank you so much for your time, Stan. I know you've probably got to run to another interview, so
everyone's freaked out. You know what, the tears that you felt just there that were going on, I think is across the board. If everyone is talking as if these are end times, and I think people think that to themselves, but then they start to hear it out there too. So there is something, going on where people feel extraordinarily unsettled. Yeah. I think it's been going on forever, this cycle. We're at the end of a cycle of plenty and prosperity, and we're in decline. But that's happened throughout history. There's always been the end of the world fantasy, right? It seems a little more realistic at this time, given everything that we see, which is really disturbing. But we're all in it, so, and it's all over the world. Everyone feels this way. I don't know. Am I saying anything that you even care about, or?
No, absolutely. I'm actually wanting to ask you if it would be okay if I included this, but I also get the sense these are your private thoughts that you might not want in the interview.
Well, because it's always hard to know how many of us there is, because there are people who think differently. There are people who don't think this way, and there are people obviously who see the world and see what's going on through a different lens. So I always worry about alienating people who see it otherwise. You can include this part too if you'd like, but we're all in this soup together, and because of social media, because we learn about things in a hot minute, and we have friends now all over the world, because of Zoom and everything else, WhatsApp, it feels much closer that we're all in this together. And yeah, I think if you're, again, this sounds judgy, but if you're awake, you're justifiably anxious, I think, to what's happening right now on almost every level.
Absolutely. And I think just with like that awakeness, I think there is, like you said, that kind of is a charged word these days, like the woke and all of that. But I do think that there are people on all sides, all political sides and all religious sides and stuff, where we all that like there's stuff is happening right now. This is important. We might not agree on what the actual problems are or how we should solve them. I think collectively as a species, we are all feeling this, and I don't want people to go away from this conversation thinking that there isn't hope, because I feel like when we come together, when we have these conversations, when each of us individually does the best that we can to learn and grow within the values that we have, even if we have different values, we can come together and find our sameness and our shared goals and our shared interests of what's going to support all of us together to creating a better world. And I really wish that we could all put aside, because I see people on sort of my team of like what I think politically and all of that, who, because they're stuck in that otherness and they're seeing the negative things that the other group does, they're behaving in the same ways, equal and opposite ways, where our side is being just as crappy as the other side, just in a different way.
That's why I'm a fan of you know, principle-centered behavior, because that is that's the only thing that will override our primitive nature, which is to tribalize, which is to otherize, which is to protect our interests only, which is to not want to lose anything and not want to even recognize that we've lost, right? Or be able to grieve. That's another thing. And so, you know, of course I feel hopeful. And one of the ways I feel hopeful is with my partnership and with my friendships. Also we've, you know, human beings have seemed to, you know, at the last minute seem to have come up with ways to survive, right? So, you know, we're in the middle of it, and I don't think we can see what's actually going to happen. We just have our imaginations. And imagination, of course, because of the brain's negativity bias, is always a dangerous thing, right? In the absence of knowing something, we imagine the worst.
But like you said, we can we can individually and collectively imagine a better future and start to take steps towards creating that.
Always, that's always how we've done it. Again, we're the only species that creates things that don't really exist, and manifest them into something that does exist, right? But it starts with a dream, an image, a fantasy, an idea, right? So, all right.
Thank you, Stan.
And be well.
You too. Take care.
We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. It has been such a pleasure. I'm so thankful to Dr. Stan Tatkin for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, I will post the links to some of Stan's social media below. And my dream for all of us is that we're able to make the most out of our relationships, make the most out of our romantic relationships, our relationships with our family, our friends, our work colleagues, and the greater world, and just all of us collectively coming together and working on mutuality and what's good for all of us. So wherever politically that you lie, I just want to send you so much love, and just take a moment to have compassion for ourselves and for each other, that we're all doing the best that we can in this moment. And we also need to do better. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. I want to send you so much love. Namaste. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe and check out one of these lovely videos. Thanks for being part of this community, and we'll see you next time.